If you were trapped in a psychedelic journey for the ages, what would you do? A magical trinket called the Bloom is causing destruction to the entire world, and only a naked swamp witch can stop it. I'm here to break down the mistakes made, what you should do, and how to beat the Bloom in Spine of the Night. This naked witch is going to find herself in a world of trouble. Traversing through a frozen tundra, the fallen witch queen Zod here makes her way up a snowy mountain with only one goal in her mind: reclaim what was stolen from her. She makes it up the steep mountainside, finding a large skull formation buried into the ground. Zod walks closer and stumbles upon a mysterious-looking shrub. That's when the sword-wielding guardian stands up from his slumber to confront her, informing the witch that what she's staring at is the Bloom, the last light of the gods, and threatens to kill her if she tries to take it. Zod insists that she comes in peace, and the man orders her to turn back. The Witch Queen informs him that the Bloom is weakening, which pisses him off even further. She brings out another flower from her chest and explains that the Bloom has spread throughout the lands, coming from one spot of bloom, and she's here to relieve him of his guardian services, mentioning that she only regrets that it took so long to find him. The man questions how she arrived at the same time that the Bloom began to wither, growing suspicious of what changed in the world below them. Zod reveals that her home, the great swamp of Bastai, was destroyed, and she used to serve as a leader to her land's worshippers. This is all extremely confusing and is about to get a whole lot more weird, but follow along. She decides to explain the entire story of how she arrived here from the top to bottom, back to the swamp. While chanting to a bunch of other scantily clad hippies, Zod orders her followers to stare into the fire, and she throws a number of flowers from her trinket, causing a blue flame to emerge from their big bonfire. Suddenly, invaders attack and brutally take out members of her tribe, and she orders them to fight back. They do try their best to fight off the armed attackers, managing to kill some of the armored men, but it's not enough. Zod here watches as the worshippers around her are brutally torn apart in every single way that you can think of in a dark fantasy anime. She then gets restrained by the mongrel leader, who pulls her towards him, ordering his men to chain her up and take this witch queen along with them. Leaving the swamp, the mongrel welcomes her to civilization, informing the girl that she's been taken hostage at the request of his master. They enter the village as this horse-riding man, Sur, follows from behind and is stopped by these guards, who ask him what is an outsider doing here. He reveals that Lord Pyranton has requested a scholar to record the growth of their city. They reluctantly let him through as the scholar rides through the creepy-looking town. He walks inside this darkened castle and sees a certain somebody do something really nasty, and fortunately are very not suitable for YouTube, and then sees this dude wearing a goat head peek around from behind the door. Ugh. Once again, this world is seriously messed up and full of a lot of nasty things. I don't want to even know what's going on behind that door, and thankfully neither does Sur. Ignoring the definite red flags he just witnessed, Sur makes his way into the main chamber and introduces himself to Lord Pyranton, who's absolutely wasted. The Lord says hello, and oh, by the way, how long does it take for him to arrive from his city to this castle? And he is told that it only takes a day's ride. Lord Pyranton freaks out and demands to know why it took months for a scholar to come here and mark his achievements regarding their city's exponential growth. Sur apologizes and comments on his father's quickly expanding empire, but the Lord interrupts, insisting that he forget about his father's achievements and focus on the city that they're standing in. He assures the scholar that this city will be the spear tip of the empire very soon. That's when he mentions to Sur of a very important day. They've finally removed the roadblock, the swamp people who have been halting their progress. He orders the scholar to sit down and tells him to pay attention, demanding they bring in the witch. Zod walks inside, and the woman is brought to Lord Pyranton. She tries to attack the Lord but is pushed over, being informed that struggling will only make it worse. Lord Pyranton asks her why she leads the swamp tribe All Sorrow. Angered, Zod tells him that the great swamp is called Bastai, giving whoever loves her peace and harmony. Very nice. The Lord insists that he'll take whatever he wants from the swamp and orders his lackeys to keep her still, and he's given a whip, which he tells Sur to record each and every time he hits her. Marks down this momentous moment in history. Ugh, this man is sick in the head, and he has access to way too much power for his own good. Okay, this is some highly sickening stuff that we're dealing with right now. I've seen a lot of anime, but I've never seen a foreign fantasy anime world go from 0 to 100 so quickly. It's not looking like this is your usual kind of unicorn and fairies anime universe. dangerous. Everyone around Zod here is an outright killer, and we need to take this situation with extreme care if we want to survive. Let's just assume that we can't use any kind of extreme magic to help us out of our chains, though that would be very convenient. So that means we're trapped with heavy metal weighing us down. Looking around the room, we need to assess what's around us, and who's around us, and what we can use to get the hell out of here. This may look like an unbeatable situation, but Zod is lucky enough to have a few key things in her favor. Always remember in life, it's good to stay very calm in life or death incidents, because even one wrong move or misstep could mean an axe to our neck. Okay, first off, one, she isn't actually chained to anything that's keeping her in place. That's good, which means that running away is a possibility. We need to be super calm and relaxed and look around very casually and see where the front door is. And remember, Zod was only dragged here recently, which is a positive thing that we can lean on. In fact, while these chains might seem like a horrible inconvenience to deal with, the way that it's made and shaped can actually be used in our favor. Assuming that the wrist locks aren't too heavy, and judging by the way Zod has her hands down, let's just assume they're around 20 pounds each. So it's pretty heavy. But either way, that's enough rambling. We can look at these chains as more of a weapon than something that's holding us down, if you really think about it. There's nothing stopping us from whipping these chains onto Lord Pyranton's head and knocking him clean out. Not only that, there doesn't seem to be anyone wielding a bow or some other kind of ranged weapon, which means we do have an advantage of being able to keep our distance while knocking these fools out and using the chains that bind us. If we're quick and savvy, we could aim for the mongrel here, which will give us some time to take out the other guards sitting by the entrance. For such a proud city, they don't seem to have much in the way of protection, especially being at the Lord's throne room. Must be due to budget cuts or something. We could also knock over this pit of fire right next to us. This would cause the carpet to ignite and create another distraction that will help us once we've escaped the building. And also, there is still a pretty sizable village full of warriors outside that might want to chop us down, so maybe we should avoid that. But we do need something to help our escape mission after leaving. There's no way we'll be able to run away without anyone spotting us. And as you can see from our lack of clothes, we stick out like a sore thumb. So the first opportunity I'm going to get is I'm going to take off my witchy headdress and put on the clothes of the locals. That way I will stand out less. While it's true the cards are really stacked against us, there is a tiny chance that we could make it out of here alive. The mongrel here stops him before the torture session begins, letting him know that Zod is capable of putting on a majestic show. They saw it all before the mongrel gave the go-ahead to kill all of her people. She was able to fill the sky with some blue flames, and the color of the bonfire also changed blue. Hearing this, Lord Zod gives her a chance to show off her moves in exchange for no torture. Carefully, Zod crawls over to this fire pit and changes the flame from red to blue, chanting a mysterious phrase which causes images to appear inside. Lord Pyranton, like a dummy dum-dum, leans in closer and asks her what do the words mean. But that was his biggest mistake. Zod throws the flames onto his face, and the mongrel reacts by swinging his axe at her, wounding her. But Galsor jumps over on top of her and begs him to stop, stating that she's protected by the High Order of Asher, under the scholars of Pantheon Ashburban. He warns him that their crops will dry up and food will disappear, leaving the village in ruin. Hearing this, the mongrel orders them to be locked up while still clearly not caring that his boss, Lord Pyranton here, is having his face still being burned to a crispy crisp. That night, Pyranton's men attend to his burnt head as he demands to be given more wine. But his cup is empty. Ha! Sucks to be him. And he accuses the mongrel of knowing that she was going to do something. Meanwhile, Galsur here winces in pain from a deep wound on his shoulder. Remembering that Galsur was kind of nice to her, she walks over, takes a flower petal off of her flower jacket, fixing the man up instantly, and she lies back down. He says that Pyranton will kill them, and why doesn't she show any urgency in trying to escape this place with her life, pissing him off. She asks Galsur who he is before he joined Asher, and was told that he was a nobody before becoming a scholar. Zod tells him to think about what he truly wants before they die, and he drops to the ground, losing all hope. Waking up with a start, they see Lord Pyranton clanging his sword on the cell bars, and the man shows off his newly mutilated face. He curses Zod for burning his face, and in return, he burned her swamp. And he tells her to go, take a look, enjoy the view of the destruction of her home. And she looks outside to see her home destroyed. Zod breaks down in tears, and the scholar questions whether she can do more with her magical flowers, insisting that she uses it to free them. Convinced, that's when the witch stands up, rips off a chunk of flowers, and blows up a magical flame. Zod breaks out of her chains, blowing up the stone wall, and rushes outside. However, she finds out that it's far too late to save her swamp. As she gets a better look at the fire, she realizes how badly the destruction really is. Galsur demands that she joins him at the Pantheon, but Zod can't believe what has happened. That's when they spot Lord Pyranton heading towards them on horseback. Galsur drops to the ground and grabs a very long stick. Zod uses her powers to incinerate the Lord's horse, and he flies off of it, begging the girl not to harm him. She walks over to Lord Pyranton and uses her powers to have his body slowly sink into the mud, killing him. Suddenly, Galsur walks over, stabs Zod in the stomach, and rips her flowered top off. He walks over to the Lord's assistant, kills him, takes his horse, and rides off. That's mean. Rude. Galsur sorta looked like a nice guy, but I guess that's what you get for living in a world where you really can't trust anybody. Zod here really let her guard down. I mean, I know her home was just destroyed, but really, you kinda need to keep your wits about you. Even though somehow she has come back to life, which isn't too bad. She just doomed the world to centuries of torment under this tyrannical scholar from a simple mistake. From simply not paying attention and letting herself get stabbed and falling into this mud pit and dying, she doomed the world to centuries of pain. Because truly, even Lord Pyranton would have done better with our magical trinket, because at least he was honest about being what he was, a bad guy. Galsur wasn't even honest about it, which makes it worse. Now, there's been a few telltale signs about this man being evil that we should have known all along. Now, while it seems like he did try to save us against Pyranton, you have to think about it. Why would someone who doesn't know us at all jump over top of us, lie about who we really are, just to save us out of the kindness of their heart? Unfortunately, there's far too few of people like that in the world, which means he really wants us for something, which means that all of it was just an act. If she hadn't turned off her I cannot trust anybody switch, she probably would have been able to avoid getting stabbed by Galsur. And another thing, for a scholar, this guy seemed awfully self-centered about leaving the prison cell. Shouldn't he have been more at peace with himself and more zen? If he was a man of knowledge, a man of faith? While he is just a normal man, prone to his emotions. Usually those with such a strong, devout faith in their beliefs shouldn't be too scared of death. After all, he's probably going to go to a better place than this apocalyptic hellhole. This guy was hiding his true intentions all along. And now finally to my main point. Why didn't she blow up the cell door before her swamp was burnt to a crisp? It took a freaking suggestion from our good friend Galsur to even attempt using the bloom to allow us to escape. If her powers are truly this strong, then she should have been able to use it even when Zod's entire tribe was brutally murdered. But I guess somehow it doesn't work against normal humans, even though she was able to blow up a freaking wall made of stone. But who am I? I'm just an anime guy. I'm not a swamp witch who had a lifetime of using magic voodoo powers. Ugh. So annoyed. If there's one last suggestion that I could have made for old Zod here, if the bloom is such a sought-after prize and can give you powers of unimaginable magnitude, what's to stop her from throwing out a few flowers into those flames and attempt to put out the crazy wildfire, which have just killed her entire swamp? I mean, it would have been worth a try. She has a crap ton of flowers on her shoulders, but if it doesn't work, at least you tried. Finishing up her explanation of what happened, the Guardian can't believe his eyes, and he asks her how she's standing here before him, and he takes off his helmet to reveal an old grizzly man who has definitely been guarding this place for a hell of a long time. Zod confirms that she's alive by placing her hand on his cheek and says, "Can't you feel the warmth?" And she sits down. The Guardian asks himself if he's selfishly keeping the bloom hidden away from mankind if it was a good idea. She asks if she can continue on her story, and he says yes. And she tells him that after many years have passed, the once small village has now become a gigantic city. Seeing the priorities of the scholars, the people become livid, and they make a ruckus while this cart full of books is being wheeled inside of the city walls. And that's when the people snap, and one of the protesters is viciously killed. Faye here is pushed away, insisting that her fellow scholars go ahead and protect the books. Man, that's some commitment for books. I'm sure the local librarian loved her when she was a little kid. Anyways, she walks off to a secluded location and takes a breather from all the craziness, and then she hears an old man begging for food. Faye mentions that she's been here a long time and asks why the people of Asher have begun to use violence. She doesn't even recognize this city, and it isn't any longer the peaceful paradise she once knew. He explains that the city has come under a dark time with the death of their long-reigning king, who left no sons. The king ran away into the mountains and never came back, leaving the city with no food and no leadership. She hands him some cash and repeats her question about the violence, and he reveals that these scholars aren't as nice as they used to be. They discovered a life-changing secret inside of their tower and won't share it with the people. Faye suggests that it might be too insane of a power, might be too insane of a knowledge for the normal folk to comprehend. But the old man refuses to believe her and begins chanting the word doom and doom and doom and doom and doom all over again. It's kind of spooky. Inside the tower, his counselors inform the Grand Inquisitor that there aren't enough soldiers to protect the library and assure him that something bad will happen. He insists that everything will be fine, calling the pantheon an immortal being that can't be harmed, telling them that the protesters will disperse after enough time. One of the counselors suggests that they teach the normal folk their ways, but the Inquisitor recites their sacred book, reminding them that they have no obligation to help those peasants outside. And that's when he spots Faye arriving and becomes super excited and welcomes the girl, expecting the girl to have brought back a large index of books. He excuses everyone and tells them to get out of the room, and complains to Faye about his counselor's lack of knowledge. Asking to hear about the pantheon, Faye informs him that from the instructions that he gave her, she reached a set of tunnels under the Kamul region, where many of the vaults were flooded, and found sacred texts hidden within this strange-looking statue. She thought there might have been booby traps, but there was none. Only a pile full of knowledge, a treasure trove that she found. And the Inquisitor asks her, "Surely you didn't leave the best books behind in the wagon?" And Faye pulls out a number of books that she found, and the Inquisitor opens one up and is unable to read the text, and then he has an idea. That night, the hunched-over man walks through the building's hallways and opens up a secret door and heads underground. He enters this forbidden room where cut-open, naked bodies lie strewn around, and finds an older Galsur playing Picasso with his victim's blood. The Inquisitor asks information from Galsur, but he complains about being imprisoned, saying he's their oldest and wisest scholar and demands to be set free. The Inquisitor denies him his freedom, but he gives the book to Galsur and tells him that it's like nothing he's ever seen before, and it may be able to activate the Bloom's power. Galsur recognizes the text and complains again about being locked up in prison for such a long time. Yeah, we know, get over it. The Inquisitor refuses to let him out, knowing that his impulses will take over. He asks Galsur what would he need to unleash the power from the Bloom, and Galsur tells him that he could have anything he ever dreamt of. Hearing this like a fool, the Inquisitor offers to bring the tools needed for his ritual in exchange for sharing the power. Hold the phone. Did he just do that? Did he just give the keys to the kingdom to Galsur? Yes, he did. Let's see how it plays out. Galsur then stuffs a flower into his mouth and chews on it a little bit and spits it out and gives it to the man, psychotically requesting that he needs more blood. A lot more blood. Outside, the Inquisitor walks past Faye, having a conversation with her friend, and she's worried about the protesters starving, which may be the very thing that finally causes the city to crumble. He decides to go up to the upper walls and take a quick look, and sends Galsur's chewed-up flower out onto the entire city. Meanwhile, the locked-up scholar recites a set of old and ancient phrases, and begins taking control of everyone outside, who begins to repeat his words, turning them into mindless followers. Faye just massively screwed up big time by giving that book to this crooked Inquisitor. She just gave him access to almost unlimited power. Okay, here's another case example of someone who might have looked righteous at first and holy, but now they're secretly plotting to take over the entire world. Jeez, these heroin chicks can't just get a break. But again, it was even more obvious this time that we were dealing with an evil dictator. I mean, just look at the way this guy looks. From being a religious Inquisitor, he's surely doing something that no other truly righteous person would ever do. A whole army of starving villagers are perched outside of his door day in and day out, and he does nothing to help them. This is a cowardly and definitely not a way a leader should be acting kind of deal. And it's also really stupid of him because, like I said earlier, did this guy just give the person he's tormented forever a position of power? No, why would you do that? There's no way things are going to end up hunky-dory. Here's some of the signs that Faye should have looked out for. The first thing that she should have done was to question the old man more about what happened to the city. While he might seem a little out there, he looks to be homeless and would have a much more keen idea about what's going on in the streets. And this would have drove home how seriously messed up her home has gotten over this long, unspecified amount of time she's been gone for. One of the telltale signs is that Usher has been using violent weapons against those protesting for food. It's obvious that this leader is seriously mismanaging his city, to the point that he doesn't even care about it. Not only that, we've just heard that their old king has died, and is told that he's been rumored to have actually ran off to the mountainside. Why would he do this? He was probably driven away. Or it's possible that he saw what this place was turning into and got the hell out of Dodge. That being said, how the hell has the Inquisitor never been caught transporting dead bodies into Galsur's prison? Galsur seems like he's been kept here a long time, meaning that they constantly would be bringing in dead bodies for the scholar to feed off of, or experiment, or in his words, research. It's just surprising that no one working for the Inquisitor ever let it slip, and that this psycho is likely hiring a group of people to farm dead bodies. But I guess it doesn't matter now. That's when he stops the procession, and they realize that they've reached the pantheon, and they're ready to kill for food. Faye and her friend notice the ruckus and walk out to confront them, insisting that their food reserves aren't enough for everyone. However, they don't care. The protesters push forward as they're brutally chopped down. Reluctant, Faye here joins in on the action, with dozens of city folk being killed. Galsur uses the ancient text to turn the blood of the people into a floating orb, which travels all the way into his prison cell, covering him in a ball of red flowers. Suddenly, he walks over to the Inquisitor and drains the life from his eyes, transferring Galsur's body into the old man. Outside, Faye demands that they stop the violence, and she insists they'll be taught how to survive. They can teach them the kind of foods to eat, what's poisonous, what's not, not but. Gulsur appears from the holy tower and rejects her statement. But she doesn't realize that it's Gulsur. She thinks it's the old Inquisitor. And the possessed Inquisitor tells them that only great minds can comprehend the knowledge inside, ordering these peasants to leave or be killed. Hearing this, they press forward to the Inquisitor, who slices them all up in one fell swoop, using some really long, spooky-looking fingernail things. Faye's friend recognizes that he's been possessed. Furious, he rushes towards Gulsur, but that was his biggest mistake. He gets cut up to bits right in front of Faye, and is told that they were being traitors to the Usher. Gulsur announces that he'll be an oracle to the world and raises Faye into the air. They end up on the Pantheon's roof, where he proclaims world domination. He will be the knowledge to all. Faye reminds the possessed man that their oath is to protect their sacred books, but he doesn't care, and throws her into this bell. Faye stands back up with her sword drawn, however she's far too weak to do anything. Meanwhile, Gulsur's original body wakes back up and opens up a fissure of light in the sky, burning the Inquisitor's body and sending him spiraling down from the top of the Pantheon. Damn! This is more than just from 0 to 100. This went from 100 to 500 in 2 seconds. Faye just got herself seriously screwed over. And even if she manages to fight off whatever's going to attack, how the hell is she going to get down from this building? There doesn't seem to be any ladders laying around, and we're perched up on the highest point for thousands of miles. That is terrifying. Now, while Faye here was watching the evil man transform, she had a pretty clear window to realize this holy man that she once knew has now begun killing his own. This guy's an absolute menace, and he's been holding on to an almost supernatural amount of power, and apparently has no limit to what it can do. That being said, if Faye had made an attempt to attack him during any of the fighting, we might have been able to call it a day much earlier. The other soldiers could have tried to replan their attacks from when they witnessed this entire group of protesters get slaughtered instantly. They would have quickly realized that there's no way they could have beaten him through conventional means. It'd only get all of the soldiers killed. If it were me, I would have said, hey bros, maybe we need to think about this. We need to use the element of surprise. If we get too close, we're dead. And it looks like he can launch his attacks to far distances as well. By banding everyone together, our group could have attempted to throw their weapons at the Inquisitor. From the short time we've seen him, we've only seen him use his newfound powers for offensive purposes. And most people would also probably assume that he also has some sort of magical armor as well. And you're probably right, but we gotta try something. Zod explains that Gulsur awakened and destroyed the Pantheon and gathered an army of disciples with his newfound powers. The Guardian then announces doom and gloom, knowing that the bloom is a powerful weapon that is never meant to be abused. He demands that he stop her sad story, but Zod insists that he has the secret to the stars. Whatever that means. The Guardian refuses to listen, but she continues on anyways, explaining that Gulsur's army crossed the lands with a nudist army, carrying him from outside of the city, and ended up in this peaceful village where they spot thousands of soldiers coming their way. The women close up their doors while the men ready their weapons, hiding away as their enemies approach. But there's too many. They're cornered and slaughtered one by one, with Gulsur announcing victory. However, he informs his troops that he has another surprise up his sleeve for tonight. This old man watches in shock as Gulsur orders his soldiers to continue occupying the lands, being shot at by him. That's when the old man is instantly killed and his quest for domination resumes. This young couple walks out of hiding to see their entire village destroyed. This ginger girl, Day, realizes that everyone they know and loved is now gone. That night, they walk through the wreckage of their old town, and the young boy, Gull, finds a piece of the bloom. He huddles around a campfire while informing his girlfriend that while he hasn't found any food, he's found a flower. So she grabs the flower and throws it into the fire, turning blue. Later, they stare into the stars as it morphs, while romantically caressing each other. Oh, so sweet. But suddenly, a group of soldiers approach them. Day suggests that they run, but her boyfriend insists that there's nowhere to go. Gull thanks his girlfriend for the time they shared together before they're brutally killed. Gulsur's army has just taken another set of innocent lives with no stopping in sight. Okay, now these two lovebirds just completely gave up and accepted death. Don't do that, at least try something. But honestly, there was not much they could have done to avoid being slaughtered. But either way, this is how to beat anime, and I gotta figure out a way for our young couple to get the hell out of this. So here we go. Now, the first mistake they made was hiding clearly out in the open and just lying around without any protection. They don't have any weapons on them, and it's not a stretch to think that the soldiers would be roaming the city that they've just captured. In fact, this would be more than just a common sense assumption. They should not have decided to stick around and chill. I can't imagine what were they thinking to do that. It makes no sense. I mean, I get it. I love a good night sky as much as the next bro. And it's beautiful. I mean, look at the stars. They're gorgeous. But it would have been a lot safer to stay inside one of the many abandoned houses in the recently deserted village. Or even stay in the frickin' woods and don't light a fire. But if they're inside the deserted village, yes, there's a chance of still being caught. But if they were quiet and kept their mouths shut and hid in the dark, they may have had a slim chance of surviving. Now, another option would have been to hide somewhere outside of the village. The woods, like I said. This may seem like the simplest way of avoiding capture, but we have to remember that this is way back in the day, and there could have been any number of dangerous animals or plants or things that they don't know to avoid, which could have been the reason why they decided to stay where they did. But even after messing all that up and making the mistake to stick around, Gull was clearly lying to his girlfriend when telling her there was nowhere to run, because, the wall behind them is completely destroyed and they could have easily jumped over either side. These soldiers are out to kill them and aren't exactly fast moving. They even decided to slowly raise their blades into the air before landing a killing blow. I mean, come on, I tried to soften it in the beginning, but really there were so many chances to make an easy escape, but they decided not to take it. That's stupidville. Don't be stupid. Zod requests a story from the Guardian, wanting to know more about the bloom. He reveals that it was a mythical being when he was younger, explaining that the gods fought without purpose. This dead god passed his dreams onto his sons, becoming mythical creatures that were responsible for creating the world. They created themselves new children, which weren't really properly taken care of, and they were forced to survive on their own. These sons were responsible for creating natural disaster type events, which slowly caused humanity to grow angry with them. They begged for mercy from their gods, but they were rejected. And that's when a single man gathered a group of followers, showing them the way to kill the gods' children. And this man became a king, and he hunted down each god, finally killing his own creator. And after this king's death, he left a lineage of mighty warriors that constantly kept changing. The Guardian mentions one man who stood up upon a hill and found a bed of flowers inside of this strange skull formation. Breathing it in, he falls down and awakens a deep power. This man saw some really trippy stuff, driving him crazy enough to foresee a world made only of dust. He uses his intuition to save them and keep everyone away from the bloom, gifting mankind the trait of ignorance. The man tried his best to fight off everyone who came for his secrets, eventually succumbing to a skilled archer. This led to him acquiring the role of Guardian, which created a cycle of those who protected the bloom for centuries. Speaking with Zod, he says that 2 kings have been at war since he was born, causing them to wreak havoc on his fields, losing crops and resources. And furious, he decided to take matter into his own hands, killing another man to find the same skull formation lying in snow. He recalls taking a breath of the flowers and hallucinates something extraordinary, something along the lines of the meaning of life and all that jazz. And from his trippy experience, he believes that everything is meaningless. And so he takes on the role of a guardian to make sure that this dark secret is kept from humanity forever. Zod asks him why he didn't destroy the bloom after realizing its power. And he tells her that him personally removing a mystery of the night was against his power and he couldn't do it. He only was able to become a gatekeeper, hiding the connection between man and God. And that's when he complains about being tired and old and insists that she gets rid of the bloom and leave, and tells her to let him die with no hope of survival. But Zod refuses to give up and raises her flowers into the air, creating a glimmer of blue light. And if none of this is making sense to you, don't feel bad. I'm not following along all that great either. But back to the story. She details how these 3 assassins were observing Galsur's army and watched them go about their day, and they question why anyone would fight for him. This bald man, Sparrowcrow, mentions that their king Galsur promised his followers eternal life in exchange for complete devotion to his cause, attracting the weak-hearted. His partner, Falconcrow, sensing a theme here, Falconcrow confidently suggests that they each fight to survive while these people fight to escape death. Sparrowcrow scolds her for cursing them as war wages on between these 2 armies, causing violent deaths on both sides. This soldier shoots his arrow up into an incoming airship as the bird group blows fire over the soldiers, being shocked at the destruction around them inside of the city. Informants warn their leaders of this incoming threat with only 2 days until arrival. And yet again, another nudist-inspired person, this Mohawk lady Kesselren, questions why King Uxan hasn't protected this place, insisting that they do something to help. Falconcrow informs her that nothing will save them with Galsur being an immortal being. But Mohawk Lady is certain that they can simply fly over and kill him, so they give it a shot. They know that his fortress is beyond the Great Swamp and is protected by large iron walls. Mohawk reminds him Galsur's airships go in and out of the city, giving them a chance to board one of them and ride it on over to his home base. And they set the date for their big mission to start tomorrow. And they have no idea that this is going to be a big, big mistake. Okay, from the last few stories that we've just heard, I definitely advised attacking Gol Sur head on. I know these guys don't have any smartphones or Google to allow them to know that this guy is a really damn evil, deadly scholar, but they do have the ability to fly and see what kind of destruction has occurred at the hands of Gol Sur. If I was them, I'd question their thought process a little bit. That 3 barely armed people could manage to bring down a whole nation of evildoers and a freaking demigod as their leader. Bird Group should have taken their wingsuits and flew the hell out of Dodge, because there's absolutely zero chance of this going well. But I guess they're ready to die for their cause, so there's no telling them otherwise. But just take a look at these 3. They barely got any armor on and barely anything on at all. And if someone were to fire an arrow or a freaking rock at them through their wingsuits, they would go crashing right into the ground. All the cards are stacked against them. And so I'd suggest to them, if they would listen, to go fly away to a better land that doesn't have any evil ruler is definitely a better option. Watching as the airship flies from above, they wait until the opposing army flies over their catapults, sprinting off the rooftop and using their wingsuits to maneuver themselves. The group makes it safely on top, getting ready for payback. Later, they look down at the pure death and destruction, questioning why these innocent lands have been ruined. That's when Sparrowcrow spots the Black Pantheon, who their master told them to look out for, looking even worse and more evil than they could have ever imagined. Inside, these disciples approach Gol Sur, informing him of their return from the Uxan front. He asks to know if they're safe to relocate beyond the mountains. Gol Sur gestures towards them and causes a blinding light to emit from the tower. Understanding what this means, he gets up and announces that the rebirthing process will now begin. They take these corpses and lay them onto an altar, and the dead bodies are brutally mutilated, draining all of the blood from the recently murdered victims. Jeez, this guy sure loves his blood and is willing to do whatever it takes to get more of it. Getting ready for their final mission, Falconhawk here insists that they need to head in now. Any longer and the ship will land, leaving them no space to fly over the iron wall. Wishing them luck and hoping they'll meet again soon someday, but not being too optimistic about it, Sparrowcrow flies off as the other 2 infiltrate the airship. Flying into this cockpit and calmly taking out the pilot, Falconhawk informs his teammate that he's going to take out the others as she pilots their ship. Sneaking through the hallway, he finds a group of workers and calmly walks over, alerting them to his presence. They rush over towards him, but the man is too damn quick, taking out all 3 until this big guy arrives to fight. Suddenly, Kesselren is taken down by the pilot, who turns out to be not dead, strangling her and causing the ship to tilt. She manages to maneuver the ship downwards, giving her enough space to kick the man off and sends him flying off to his death. Sparrowhawk's spear is broken by the big man here, while Sparrowcrow fights with an enemy soldier who cuts her down. Falconhawk manages to get his enemy to the ground, but a pool of lava flows over and burns the both of them alive. Well, that sucks. Bummer. Seeing this, Kesselren flies out of the danger and is pushed straight into Gol Sur's lair. Oh no. And he manages to stop the ship using his bloom powers as Kesselren crashes down. Struggling to keep this massive aircraft from destroying his home, Kesselren wakes up confused and spots their target, their arch nemesis standing right in front of her. She sprints towards him and slices his back open before falling into this pool of blood. Wow, this is an absolute train wreck. This could not have gone any worse. 2 out of the 3 people dressed like birds have just been killed, and Kesselren here is the only one left. Now, she could have easily just got knocked out from the blast and is in a very bad position considering that we just absolutely pretty much destroyed Gol Sur's house. He's not going to be a happy camper about the redecoration, I'm sure. Probably isn't going to hire us again to do this job anytime soon. Luckily for us, it seems like we've actually managed to distract the man by leaving this airship and allowing it to tumble right down to his front door, because now he's way too focused on keeping it from crashing into him to even realize that we've fallen inside. This does make you ask the question though, how strong is the bloom really? We've never seen it used for many purposes, and there's an argument to be made that it gets weaker over time, but as of now, keeping a probably over 5,000-pound ship from crashing and killing Gol Sur must mean that it's pretty dang strong. Now, Kesselren may have just been submerged into a pool of blood and is definitely not getting out of this situation without getting some kind of blood disease. There's not much she could have done with Gol Sur even in his weakened state. She just isn't strong enough to take him on, just like all the others. But however, if Kesselren knew how powerful the bloom was, she could have tried to take it off of him, because there's no way that this magical trinket doesn't come with the ability to regenerate any of his lost limbs, because I'm sure it does, which means he's probably impossible to kill. So really the only shot that she had to take him out would have been to try to take off the bloom and chop off his head and hope for the best and run away. But she didn't do that, so I guess Kesselren here messed up big time and is probably going to die. Gol Sur notices the girl and lifts her up into the air, breaking each and every single bone in her body, and she questions if gods suffer as Gol Sur's lair blows up, leaving the bloom to travel downstream away from the pantheon. The bloom emerges out of the water and reanimates itself into Zod, who, wow! So that's how she gets back into the story. I told you this is a weird one. She finally awakens again and takes back what's hers. Meanwhile, Gul Sur here wakes up in a now destroyed version of his home and spots a blue light shining from this mountain. Now, Zod has finally completed her story up until the current day. She mentions that the bloom never forgets who has stared into the darkness, explaining that she found the Guardian in this exact same way. He responds by saying that the bloom has allowed him to see things unimaginable to the human eye, wondering why the knowledge has come at such a deadly cost. Zod insists that he can rest and assures him that she'll fix the mistakes made to leave mankind in peace once again. But that's when the Guardian warns her that someone is approaching before taking his final breath. Zod thanks him for his service, giving the man his last bit of womanly affection before he passes away. And now the story has come full circle. She finally reunites with her arch-nemesis, Gul Sur, who remembers exactly who she is. He never bothers to remember anyone else, even after being alive for centuries. Gul Sur tells her that she's going to be killed for her bloom, just as she was killed hundreds of years ago. Zod announces that these are the last few flowers that the world will ever see, but Gul Sur doesn't care. He wants to keep the bloom for himself. It's like every bit of it dry. She warns him not to use it any longer, and he orders the girl to be killed. She's shot down by Gul Sur's lackeys, and he walks over, cursing her to death. And so Zod lets out one final chant, consuming the men in a blue light, using the last of her powers to reanimate a group of skeletal warriors which come out of their graves and kill Gul Sur's men. He tries to fight them off, but his powers are now far too weak. The evil man is restrained by Zod's lackey, and he gets split into two, and she gets up, walks over. Oh, by the way, he's still not dead, so she walks over and grabs his heart and rips it out, ordering him to look at the stars before crushing the organ, and an explosion hits the surrounding area, sending Zod off into space, and flowers drop back to Earth. And now the world is finally safe from this crazy scholar. And that's the end of the story. See, I told you it's a weird one. Thanks for listening.